I'm on the East Coast in Boston here, so it's the sun has set. But I look forward to chatting about OKRs and AI for the next 30 minutes. Thanks for all coming. And my name is Stephen Smith. My background is in building data science and AI infrastructure projects for probably the last 30 years. I've also, as a serial entrepreneur, I have built and sold several companies. And then also in my spare time, did a lot of coaching of startup companies at MIT and at Harvard. And last count about 90 companies. And kind of that weird background of data science, machine learning scientist, coupled with looking at how companies run and how teams are managed. I came up with this idea of how to use this new management tool called an OKR to help with AI and data science teams. And I think if you have run or you're on a data science or AI team, I think you'll kind of appreciate what OKRs can do for you. So I'll be talking about that today, and feel free to go ahead and jump in if you have questions or post a question on the chat. I'll try and answer it if I can or at the end. And let me see if I can get to the next slide here. I've got that. Got that. There we go. Let me get this over here. So first question is, do you actually set goals or objectives for your AI projects? Seems like a basic thing you'd want to do in business, but I'm surprised that a lot of companies actually consider AI projects or data science to be kind of special. And sometimes they don't set goals, but a good test for this is, do you know what your goals are right now? You have some AI projects are running, but do you have specific objectives or goals for those projects? Or is the goal just to do AI? If you have goals, do you hit your goals? And then really importantly, if you know your goals, do your subordinates and the people on the team know the goals? There was a recent study done. They asked managers what percentage of the employees they thought would know the goals for the company. And the managers estimated probably be about 60%. So 6 out of 10 employees would probably know what the main goals, objectives of the company were. When they checked on it, it was actually less than 10%. So if you do have goals, it's also important to communicate them. And AI projects, machine learning, et cetera, are a little bit of a different animal. And here are some of the reasons I've heard some of the companies I've worked with. AI is super creative. We can't promise anything. Who knows what we'll discover? It's all blue sky. It is different, but on the other hand, it's still part of business now. We have to set some goals. AI is iterative. We use agile and lean methodologies with a 2-week time horizon with our sprints. All good, but the reality is that even if you're using an awesome agile methodology, OKRs can actually run on top of that. I'm actually working with a company right now where they have a really super agile process set up, and they put OKRs on top of that in order to set some goals. So another thing is I hear from AI managers, AI can't be rushed. We can't set an arbitrary time limit for delivery. Again, sort of true, but also we need to do better and probably set some times. And then again, I'm doing something so cutting edge that I just can't adhere to the best practices. So if we're using OKRs or lean methodology elsewhere in the organization, I can't do that. I can't apply that to AI. And again, all of these are partially true, but it's also something that you need to get around because, as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you are going, you will end up someplace else. And in typical Yogi Berra fashion, that is deeply true if you think about it. So goals are important, even if you are doing AI or machine learning. So the point of this talk is that though AI applications are creative and unpredictable, it can still be improved with best practices. And those best practices are obviously OKR. OKR stands for objectives and key results. that was practiced and evangelized by John Doerr and Google. And a lot of other high-tech startups. Will show you some of those in a second. And it can accommodate the variability of AI. It's kind of almost invented for things that have a lot of requirements for disciplined delivery, but also have some variability in whether they can be delivered or not. It's important to recognize that OKRs work well with lean development practices. It is a help to guide them. It's a great way to kind of at a high level understand what's going on, but it does not replace them. But if all you're using is lean development, it's really not sufficient for AI projects and data science projects. And the nice thing about OKRs is that they link the AI and data science directly to the goals and objectives of the company and align them so that the resulting products are valued by senior management. And I think if you are a data scientist or an AI researcher, you recognize the importance of this statement. This is basically saying that your work will not be wasted, that when you set up a goal, you have alignment with senior management so that when you deliver some awesome, amazing models, they will actually be used rather than ignored or executed, but then not implemented in the real world. And that's a tremendous value of having OKRs implemented in AI and an AI team. So who uses OKRs? Hopefully after this talk, you will. My current company is G7 Research. Again, any of the companies I'm coaching out of MIT or Harvard, I strongly encourage them to use it. It's such a lightweight process. Even if you are a tiny little company, it's a great way to get started. There is this other not tiny little company called Google that we'll see in a second has built themselves solely based on OKRs. For that reason alone, it's worth looking at them. It has been what Google has used to run the company from basically 2 employees up to the size they are to now. Netflix also uses it. Other companies, Amazon has used it in various ways. And that last one there is Bono's company from the rock band U2. Believe it or not, they actually use OKRs for some of his charity work. He's recognized that to solve poverty and reduce illness around the world, that OKRs are actually a great match. So if you can imagine, it works for a rock band singer as well as some of these high-tech companies. It's pretty flexible. So let's just take a quick background view of why do goals help? They help you to focus on the most important thing. There's lots of things to do, lots of things to read. They help you focus on what's most important. John Doerr actually calls goals a vaccine against fuzzy thinking. A vaccine against fuzzy thinking. And I think that's a pretty good description. Number 2, lower stress. This one might not be obvious, but I have seen a lot of companies where the employees are really stressed out because they're not quite sure what they're supposed to be working on. You'd think that would be kind of fun, right? Go work on whatever you want. But it's really the opposite. People like to know that they're working on the important things and things that are significant. And it may be hard, but if they know that they're working on the right things, it'll actually lower stress. It also increases trust throughout the organization by making people accountable. They have particular deliverables, and they actually build trust with the people around them because they have these deliverables. And obviously, if they are on the hook for them, they will be measured by them, and they can improve their accountability. The other thing is also because OKRs are transparent, they encourage support from others. And they create a feeling of success. I was at a game conference, game developers conference, and the game designer for a very popular game, Uncharted, actually admitted that when he went home at night, he wasn't sure, and this is from a very successful video game, he wasn't sure whether he had made progress or not. So he'd actually go and play solitaire or one of these Angry Birds or something like that. because he felt like he was making some progress. And this is basically, he probably would have done better if you've been using OKRs, because they tell you what you're doing. And then as you knock them down, you build a real feeling of success, which is really helpful to building teamwork. So goals are awesome, but they also have a downside sometimes. They can incent the wrong behaviors. So for instance, you may remember Wells Fargo a couple of years ago had the goal to obviously make revenue and open as many accounts as they possibly could. Good goal. But they missed out on customer satisfaction, and also kind of missed out on not doing something illegal. They actually opened accounts for customers that didn't know that they had the accounts. So be careful what you wish for. You have to be very careful in setting your goals. Another example from a long time ago was Ford Pinto had exploding gas tanks. They had an awesome goal of a lightweight car, fuel efficient and at low cost, but they also needed a goal of safety. And again, challenges with Facebook and some of the other tech giants are monetizing customer data, but they are now also facing the additional goal of preserving personal privacy. So goals can incent the wrong behaviors, and this is kind of one of the things that OKRs help with. The other problem with just regular goals is that they can incent sandbagging, where sandbagging is basically the person who's setting the goal knows that they are going to be evaluated on whether they achieve that goal or not at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year. And they might actually make or lose a lot of money based on whether they achieve the goal. So what's human nature? People are going to basically set the goal lower than they might otherwise be able to achieve in order to get as much personal compensation as they can. So it results in lower goals of lower aspiration, and also murky objectives, right? If you don't have a crisp objective, then you can always argue you achieved it. So goals have these current problems. And Bono recognized that, and he summed up the OKRs as that you want an environment for risk and for trust, and where failing is not a fireable offense. And that is particularly true in AI and data science projects, where there is often no guarantee of success at the end. So successful companies set only a few goals. That is an important thing to do. Larry Page agreed with this. And it's been my experience too. The most successful companies I've mentored emphatically decide what they are not going to do. And I heard a great little catchphrase the other day: great companies do less and obsess. And this is very true. And you'll see that a big part of OKRs is setting no more than 3 to 5 objectives. So the other part of a goal is the fact that you actually have to do stuff to achieve it. You can't just come up with a big aspirational goal and dream about it or visualize it. You have to actually do stuff. And Andy Grove, who actually invented OKRs at Intel many years ago, said it almost doesn't matter what you know. Execution is what matters the most. This is all leading up to what you'll see for the OKR structure. And this is a picture of the Dead Sea Scrolls from way back when. But on the left is actually one of the first OKRs that was created by Grove in 1980 for Intel. And this was the objective. Kind of, it is something that is meant to be aspirational. Establish this particular microprocessor as the highest performer in the industry. But then he said, well, that's the aspiration, but it's not very specific. Why don't we back that up with how we're going to do it? And those are the key results. And these are the actual OKR from 1980, perhaps the first official OKR ever. And you see they had key results which look very measurable. Develop and publish 5 benchmarks showing superior performance. Repackage the entire family of products that should be measurable. and get the 8 megahertz part into production. So you can tell this is pretty far back in history when 8 megahertz was considered an aspirational goal or key result. You'll notice also here we have these numbers 0.6, 1.0, and 0.0. These are basically showing after the quarter has ended what percentage of the goal was achieved. 0.6 for the first one, 100% for the second one, and 0 on the third one. How did we get to this point? We got Stonehenge over there, ancient history. Goals are not that ancient. In the 1940s, goals were pretty easy, which was make things run faster, cheaper, better, make more money, more profits. And we basically had process optimization, and that our goals were defined by a senior management to tell everybody what to do. In the 1950s, management by objectives came around. That's still very valuable, but it was more collaborative in setting goals. And this was representative. The industry was changing. It wasn't clear exactly what you needed to do, and you really needed more feedback from your managers and even from your workers as to what particular goals and objectives should be, and what's achievable and what's aspirational. Then in the 2000s, and there was other goals in there as well, but there was the balanced scorecard where it said it's not just the financial goals, think back of our Wells Fargo example, but we also have to have soft goals that might be, for instance, employee satisfaction or ability to recruit or training for our employees. And that actually worked very well for a time. But then OKRs was developed to address some of these other issues that we had with goals that came from these other systems. And it was a particularly good match for high technology. Again, Andy Grove invented it, but John Doerr was kind of the Johnny Appleseed Pied Piper of letting everybody know about it. And it's certainly served Sergey and Larry Page very well at Google. So let's look at an example. I'm up here in Boston, so we'll look at our football team. That's picture of Robert Kraft there, the owner of the team. And his objective might be to become the most valuable and most respected team in the NFL. And that's kind of an aspirational goal. It's not particularly measurable. I guess it's sort of measurable, but it's very aspirational. It's also very inspirational. But the key results to get there would be to win the Super Bowl. That would imply that you are the best at what you do. To make money, you need to sell out the stadium. But there might also be other key results that are measurable. The Patriots have had a history of problems off the field with Deflategate, where Tom Brady was deflating footballs, or Spygate, where the coach was perhaps videotaping the other team incorrectly. And then Robert Kraft had some issues personally as well. And this would be important for having a team that's respected. So you can see the objective is very broad, but the key results are very specific. Now, that would get trickled down to the head coach. This is Bill Belichick, a much younger Bill Belichick over here on the right. And his objective would be to win the Super Bowl. And his key results might be results are on the offense, having a strong offense that has a lot of yards per game, and a strong defense, which doesn't allow a lot of points per game. He then also has coaches. Josh McDaniels here, who has those OKRs cascade down to him. He's the offensive coach. He takes that objective from his head coach, 450 yards per game, and he breaks that down into passing and rushing key results. Then Tom Brady works for him, sort of, and he might take just the passing results, but he's aware of all these other goals and objectives throughout the organization. But he might take just that result, and then he might break that down into specific key results in terms of completion yards per game, being able to play in all the games without getting injured, low interceptions, and of course, don't deflate the footballs, because we know that's for the owner of the teams to not have any more bad press. So why are OKRs good? OKRs separate out the objective as a single aspirational sentence from the key results, which are very specific and measurable. This allows employees to dream big while being held accountable to measurable outcomes. So it sort of addresses this problem of sandbagging. It allows people to shoot high, but it also makes it measurable. So it's not just a dream, it's actually something about how you will actually get there. One of the other great things about OKRs is they are simple. They do not take a lot to implement. Another cool thing about OKRs is that you don't need to get 100% on them. It's kind of this weird thing that if you ended the quarter and you got 100% on all of your key results, your boss should come to you and say, hey, you didn't really set your objectives high enough. OKRs generally expect about a 70% completion rate for the KRs. And again, that kind of takes the pressure off. It says, look, we want you to set goals that really are hard to achieve. And if you don't achieve them, that's okay. And the benefit to management of that is that that means that the people that are working for you are shooting high and they're on the same team. They're not fighting with you and not sandbagging. And this is another one of the great things about OKRs. Another good thing about OKRs is that they are transparent. So we talk about printing out the OKRs and putting them in office stores now. We're not all working in offices anymore. But if you do share them digitally, you need to find ways that they don't just get buried away on some shared drive someplace. They have to be front and center. And I always say that the CEO of the company should be able to walk down the hallway and stop any employee and ask them what the company's 3 to 5 objectives are. And the employee should be able to say that. So transparency is very, very important. Everybody knows everybody else's OKRs. And ideally, they would be there to help them achieve those OKRs. And if a person is having trouble achieving their OKR, they should ask for help, and people should be willing to give that help. And all of this comes from the fact that it's completely transparent. We got a picture of a transparent jellyfish here where you can really see the inner workings of the animal. Sort of the same thing for a business. The OKRs expose the inner workings of the business. And what that does is puts everybody on the same team pulling in the same direction. Because you know what your boss's OKR is, you know what your boss's boss is, you know what your subordinate is, you know what your peers are. And it really builds teamwork in a great way. And here we go. This is teamwork. OKRs are typically not tied directly to compensation. I would suggest that a small bonus, maybe 1% of total compensation, be tied directionally to the OKR. Again, you don't want to have too high a bonus because then it kind of corrupts the system. OKRs are flexible. They are done every quarter, which allows you to modify them and to match the rapidly changing business. Although if you can get through the quarter without modifying them, that's obviously better. In the talk, and you guys get the talk after this, I have a couple of exercises you can go through, but I'm going to skip over that for now, just because I'm kind of running out of time. We can go through those. You can go through those on your own, or we can chat afterwards. A couple of questions about OKRs. When John Doerr presented this to Sergey and Larry, he basically pitched the idea and they're like, nah, I don't know. It's obviously a big change for a company or an organization. So when you pitch this internally, you just pitch it and say, hey, it's like making pancakes. You know, the first pancake's usually a little bit malformed, doesn't come off the griddle that well. But let's try it and see what happens. You just try it for a quarter. And if you do that, there's no pressure on you to do it, but you learn a lot. And if successful, then you've kind of started to introduce our OKRs to your organization. Some OKRs you need to do better than 70%. If you have a legal requirement by an SLA for 99.9999% uptime, then you got to do it. So 70% is not going to be good enough. You really got to hit it. Some of the common mistakes with OKRs, complexity is the enemy of OKRs. So picking more than 5 objectives or key results is typically where people get themselves into trouble. Making the OKR descriptions too complex. They should be literally like one-liners. And again, if they're too complex, they're not going to pass the walking down the hall test that people can tell you what the objectives are. Getting too carried away and tying the OKRs to big bonuses or changes in compensation. Assigning shared accountability. It's like, everybody there should be one person on the hook for each of the KRs, because shared responsibility, basically that person who's on the hook for the KR can ask for help from anybody. So the team is working, but there has to be one person who is responsible for making sure that that happens. And obviously not taking due dates seriously, that's a cultural thing that's really important. So in summary, OKRs, the mission is why you're doing it. Bono is there to save the world. That's his mission. His objective is lowering poverty in particular places in Africa. Key results might be how he's going to do it, specifically what he's going to do that quarter to get it done. The benefits are helping you to focus on the most important, lowering stress for your organization and your individual contributors. And I think that second one, lowered stress, is a really big one, because that's really a problem. And then also increased trust through accountability, support from others, and generally a feeling of success when you do what you say you're going to do. I have some other slides here that you can take a look at when you get the deck. These are just particular KPIs that are good for AI projects. And this is a pretty simple way to actually get it launched. It's kind of a recipe for getting it launched within your company. Pretty simple to do. If you want to go online, you can actually take I think it's like a 20-question OKR quiz just to see if you are staying awake during this talk. These are instructions to do it. Again, they'll be sent out with the slides afterwards. And if you have any questions, I guess I have 30 seconds here. Follow up. This is part of a longer training course and implementation program that I have. If you're interested, just contact me at steve@jognog.com. Also, email me if you want to get a copy of my paper, How to Use OKRs for Your AI Team. And then for sure, take a look at John Doerr's TED Talk that's on YouTube or TED. And that is it.